Hi, welcome to another episode of the Family Renewal Podcast. I am Israel Wayne, and today we have a topic that we have not really discussed on the podcast so far, and I'm excited about it. My friends, the Groves, are here. So Rory and Becca Groves are uh, friends of mine from Minnesota that I met at the homeschool conference out there a few years back when I was speaking, and had the opportunity to spend some time with them and their sweet children in their home. And they have a small farmstead that I kind of envy, because in my mind, I like the thought of being involved in having a small farmstead. The difficulty that we have is that I travel an awful lot, especially in the spring, and we found that it's very difficult to find neighbors who are willing to come and take care of the animals for a month while you're gone, especially in the winter in Michigan. It has revealed to me the fact that friends are really not what they pretend to be. So no, I'm just kidding about that. I don't think that's probably the real test for friendship there at all, actually. But no. But excitingly, they have a book, and so their book is called Durable Trades. And this is a book that kind of resonates with something that I wrote, one of mine. I wrote a book called Raising Them Up, Parenting for Christians. And there's a chapter in that book where I talk about how our country shifted after the Civil War with the Industrial Revolution from family-based economies and an agrarian-based lifestyle to what we have now, which is really this dynamic where parents have been taught that they need to leave the home and go work in either the factory or the cubicle. And it's taken both mom and dad out of the home, and it's put children into institutional schools. And these families really, barely share an existence in their own homes. The latest statistics from the National Labor Bureau, which is a federal agency, says that the average mom spends an hour a day with her children, and the average dad spends 29 minutes a day interacting with his or her children. And so I know that you guys have a great heart for helping families to maintain family unity. So first of all, Rory and Becca, welcome to the Family Renewal Podcast.
Thank you, Israel. It is a real honor to be here with you today.
So let me just ask you about when I was a kid, the most popular radio show on family was Focus on the Family with James Dobson, and they had a theme song that was sung back in the 80s by Steve and Annie Chapman. When that show would come on, the theme song would come on, and it would say this. The name of the theme song was called "Turn Your Heart Toward Home." So how did the Lord begin this process for you guys of turning your heart toward home? And tell us a little bit about your family and just how God has led you as a family.
Sure. Well, that's a very relevant question because it had a lot to do with our meeting you, Israel.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, we had two kids. They're very little, and we were just beginning to ponder the question of homeschooling. We both grew up in the public school system, but some of our friends, people that we really respected, were homeschooling, and it was becoming more common. I don't know if I could say mainstream, but we went to the Minnesota Association of Christian Homeschoolers conference that year, and you were the keynote speaker. And I was perched on the fence when we came to that conference just to see what this was all about. And a lot of what you presented and what some of the other people presented at that conference really firmly planted my feet on the side of homeschooling is the right decision for our family. And I would credit homeschooling as really rearranging our priorities around family discipleship. Growing up in a public school system, I grew up in church, several generations of Christian parents and even some pastors in the family. So church was very much a focus point of our faith development, but we didn't have that in-home family-centered discipleship. And when we started homeschooling, we just kind of realized there was so much freedom and opportunity for us to raise our children as we felt was important and to teach them the values that we had. And that started us on the journey of really wanting to do everything that we could as parents to pass on our faith to our children. And that eventually led to questioning the way that we were working and what our priorities were around income and money and work.
Sure. So on this aspect of family-centered economy, family-centered business, you have a college degree, right?
Right.
Do both of you have a college degree?
I do. I'm an
You do.
education major.
You're an
Yep.
education major. And what was your major, Rory?
Computer science.
Computer science.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, studies say that basically 3/4 of Americans don't use the degree in which they're credentialed. And yet it's so expected that parents will send their children to college and that's the best way to prepare them for their future employment. What are some of your thoughts on that, having both been college graduates, having had that experience? You're obviously thinking, and in your book, you're talking about some different kinds of ideas that are outside of just that, we're preparing you to work on the assembly line or in the cubicle. You're thinking outside of that box. So, what's kind of led you in that direction, and just give us some of your thoughts on how your thinking may have changed over time. And both of you are free to respond if you want to on that question.
Yeah, sure. I'll start on that one. Certainly college has been a question that we've been talking about more recently. Our oldest is 10. We're a ways off, but those years go pretty quickly now.
Mhm.
And in the course of reading or writing this book, I was exposed to a lot of information about the history of work in this country. If I can give just a quick synopsis, the book examines professions that have lasted since the founding of our country and are still thriving today. So it actually documents the most durable professions. These are not just manual trades, but some of them are white collar jobs as well, that have survived all the upheavals, revolutions, civil wars, depression, upheaval, all that kind of thing, and are family centric.
Mm-hmm.
So they have those traits in common. Obviously, before the Industrial Revolution, all the trades were family centric because the family was the economy. You had to have the family to survive, and everyone had their part. And so in the course of researching this book, I write a little bit about that and share some of that. And one of the things that's so unique that's was unique to our time now, but was not unique to all of human history, was apprenticing. We didn't have this form of secondary education. I mean, it had been around in seminaries and some of the very more advanced degrees going back for several centuries, but very, very few of the population ever went to college. What they would do instead was apprentice with a master. And time after, maybe they're 13 or 14 or 15 years old, they begin apprenticing with someone. And then by the time they were 16 or 17, they were a master and they were able to go off and set up their own shop and provide for their own family. And it was a very durable way to provide training. They not only didn't have to go into debt for the next 20 or 30 years of their life to pay that off, they actually got paid at some point along the way. So they were paid to learn, and they were actually providing a very useful skill along the way. And so one of the things that we lost in the Industrial Revolution was this system of apprenticing. We changed from a method of primary education into just to create literate populace and people who could have some basic education and literacy, into creating workers for the factory system, because the factory system was such a miracle of the Industrial Revolution. Everybody, and if you read the literature of the time, the 1860s and the 1920s, everyone was praising the Industrial Revolution and how it modernized everything and created all this abundance. And they kind of looked down their noses at the former way of apprenticing. And so it's interesting because what I discovered in that whole process is what was lost. And what was lost was mentorship.
Yeah.
So you can have a student grow up in a public system or even a private system and be passed from teacher to teacher to teacher. And they can learn the academic skills, but never actually learn the integrity, the honesty, the values, or the faith that would normally come through an apprentice type of a system. And so that was one of the most intriguing things. So as it pertains back to your question on college, Israel, college is an appropriate choice depending on the field you're going into. but it's not appropriate for everyone. And there are many, many vocations out there which are far more meaningful and far more lucrative that don't require college degrees than I was ever aware of. And so my encouragement, to our own kids at this time is to try a lot of different skills and try out a lot of different things and see if there's something that you feel gifted in and particularly interested in. And maybe we can arrange for, in your younger years, you can apprentice with someone and at least learn the skill a little bit before you decide to take on $100,000 of college debt and get a degree that you may never use at all.
Mm-hmm.
So Becca, let me ask you a question to kind of guide a little bit, just what's coming to my mind. Knowing Rory, he's a guy who questions things, and I like that. I'm like that too. And he also researches and really tries to get to the bottom of issues and so forth. But he's gone on a journey. And sometimes as a wife, it can be a little scary when, your husband's going on a journey. It's like, okay, where does this all end? Yes. But you've been on a journey too, because you said that your degree is in education. And so obviously your training and background was preparing you to think quite differently than this journey that you all have been on together. What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah. It's funny. I just wrote an article called "When One of You Has the Dream," because Rory was starting to kind of go in this direction of, I think we should move to a farm. And it took me a long time to realize, I think he's totally serious. I think at the time we were in Minneapolis, we both were raised, in the suburbs. And so to move to a farm, and he was saying, I think we should get animals. What in the world? Like he had a lap dog and I had a house cat, and so for sure there's been, just this journey in a marriage where like one person is really excited about going in a direction and the other person is like trying to catch up. And it took a lot of prayer and discernment in terms of just like where our family landed. Homeschool was a complete surprise to me. I thought I would be a public school teacher. That was, what I went to school for, which actually relates to what you were just speaking of. I think about me picking a career, when I was 17, 18 years old. And it was basically, well, I like kids and here's a way to make money. And what I appreciate about Rory's research with durable trades is he has all these criteria that are not just financial. It's not just money. It's, does this lead to a flexible lifestyle? Does this like lead to family togetherness? Do we have to live in a specific city to be able to do this job, or can we move around? And so that too just was a helpful, just part of this journey. Yeah, a metric, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you another question on top of that. So let's say that you have another family where they're experiencing that dynamic, and you can probably speak to it more as the wife, where the husband is maybe catching a vision for a different path, maybe even just whether it's the homeschooling path or the single income path, which is scary enough for some people, quitting a job as a mom or a wife and staying home with your children. How can you encourage other moms who are scared maybe by the possibilities of leaving the well-worn highway and going onto the dirt road? What can you tell them?
Our first year of homeschooling, I told Rory, this is not going to be my thing. Do not think that I'm just going to become a homeschool mom. And literally the next year I was like helping lead our homeschool group in our town, just a girl who's always eating her words. So, to me, like that's marriage is, just working together with prayer and discernment. But I think that's what marriage is, right? One person has a dream, the other person is trying to figure out, is that a good idea? Well, let's just try it. At any given time, I could just put my foot down and say, sheep? No way, we're not doing sheep. That's ridiculous. Who do you think we are? Or I can say, well, let's get some books at the library. Let's read up on it and let's give it a shot and try it for a year. And, now we're 4 years into sheep and we're currently right now waiting for lambs to be born. And it's a joy. It is so fun. But I remember those moments where you're like, is this who I married? What in the world? Like he was going to work in a cubicle and, just the trajectory we thought we were on and the way the Lord has led us is like, we laugh every anniversary. We just think about who we thought we were going to be and then who the Lord has transformed us into, and just like, oh, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
So grateful. But I think that's an actual decision that a wife has to make. Am I just going to dig my heels in and just be annoyed at these odd ideas?
Yeah.
Or either spouse.
Yeah.
Or am I going to team up and
Right.
just move forward in faith with the man that the Lord has given to me?
I love what you said too about, give something a try. Now, one thing that I'm going to jump in and give my own opinion here, because I have an article that I wrote one time. I'm trying to remember if it's still in publication somewhere, but on having a family business, considerations before you start a family business. And one of the things that I warn people is that if they're going to go off into, starting a new family enterprise of some kind, you don't just quit your day job and start something you have no experience with, and that you have no savings and no financial capital. And, because a lot of times these businesses take a long time to become profitable. So morphing into it is a good idea. So I like what you said about the sheep. Let's give it a year. Let's see how we like it. Let's see how it works. You're not necessarily locking yourself into a life sentence,
right?
Especially if you keep your other employment going while you're transitioning or moving. So,
yeah.
So Rory, if somebody's thinking, we feel like we're kind of trapped in terms of a job that we hate, career that has no future, maybe just the dependency economically on something that's not secure, and that we can easily be just downsized. And I mean, I know we have no guarantees, but there are a lot of good reasons that people have to think, we're just one corporate decision away from being in a huge financial hurt, and we need to make better decisions for our family that provide more time, so forth. So when you started to research for durable trades, what were some of the industries that you found that were stable and that were profitable and that provided flexibility for families besides just farming? I mean, I think farming is one of those things that, like for me, I see it as an ideal. I would love the thought of doing that. I'm probably rubbish at it, to be honest. And I probably would just lose an insane amount of money trying to do farming. So let's say that there's somebody like me, and I think there's a good value in having a hobby farm, even if you lose a lot of money doing it, because that's not the whole point. It's not just to make money. Especially with children, there's a whole lot of values and wonderful things with them learning responsibility and stewardship and taking care of animals. But that's kind of what we think of sometimes. It's like, oh, well, we need to sell everything, go buy a farm.
Right.
Well, besides just, the agrarian farming lifestyle, what else did you come up with in your research?
Yeah. So, to that point of trying things out, sometimes we have a caution to do something that might fail. We usually have, that's usually the reason we don't try, because we're afraid of failure. One of the things that I would suggest is that failure doesn't necessarily mean that you miss the goal of what you were setting out to do. If the goal of the activity is to bring the family together and to learn something new and to take an adventure, even if the adventure isn't financially successful and you have to shut it down, it doesn't mean that you failed to accomplish what you set out to do.
Yeah.
And that's part and parcel of the trial and error approach that what we've taken out here. We did not come out here to become farmers. We came out here because we just wanted a little bit of land.
Sure.
And we slowly, over time, the hobby farm turned into an unprofitable working farm. And it is unprofitable because I just did the taxes for last year. But I would say
we eat really well.
We eat well, and it's an
great maple syrup.
amazingly,
That's right.
it's an amazingly fruitful endeavor in so many ways, mainly that we get to work together on so many of the projects here. So in terms of the industries that come up in the book, 4 of the top 5 ranked trades are related to food, fiber, and shelter. This is something that comes up over and over and over again in history, is that the trades that cater to basic needs are always going to be there.
Love that.
And they may go away for a while. I mean, you saw in the 2008 recession, you saw the construction industry take a huge hit.
Yep.
And right now we're seeing the restaurant industry take a huge hit.
Yep.
But these are things that come back right away. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. And then also Yeah, you don't have to quit. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is the whole agrarian side. Yeah, you don't have to quit and become a farmer. It's very difficult to become a full-time farmer if you're not actually inheriting land and equipment. It can
So
take
true.
hundreds of thousands to
True.
millions of dollars to actually start a conventional farm with enough land to turn an income for a livelihood. So you're typically going to be doing some kind of niche farming, such as opening a CSA, community supported agriculture, or you might be focused on raising grass-fed lamb, which is what we do here, and try to sell it at a farmer's market. These are going to be small income streams. They're going to take a long time to build up. The beauty of that, though, is that you're building relationships. And we have same customers that come back year over year over year. And we can see that on the trajectory in time, this will be self-sufficient operation. But what a lot of people do, and I'd encourage people to reference the book for this, is they practice multiple overlapping trades. So someone who is a shepherd is also a farmer, or someone who's a woodworker is also a carpenter. And this was really common through history. If you go back to like Ben Franklin, he was an author and publisher and an inventor, scientist. He was a statesman. These are all trades that appear in the book. And so these people at various times in their lives, they were employed in multiple things. Typically, that's what you see in family-based businesses. They're not doing just one single thing. And I'm sure this is the case with you and Brooke as well. There's not just one single thing that you're invested in. There's many things that are going on and many irons in the fire. And one of the things that I do like about that approach is it diversifies the risk in terms of if you have one income earner in the family who's got one corporate job, like you said, they're one pink slip away from that source of income drying up. But if you have 3 or 4 or 5 income streams, each one providing 10 to 20% to 30% of your income, maybe you scale back a full-time job to a part-time job, and that's 50% of your income, then you're actually going to be okay if one of those things doesn't work out for you.
Yeah.
And historically, that tended to be how people operated more.
So in your book, you have a scoring system where you rate some of these different occupations and trades. Tell us what that's about. Sure.
So what I set out to do, and this comes a little bit from my background in computer science. I've been a programmer professionally. I own my own software firm for 20 plus years. And one of the things, there's a lot of benefits to modern high technology, but there's a lot of detractions as well. And one of those is that things are constantly going obsolete in this industry. And you have to constantly retrain, and everything you create is, by the time you're done with it, it's pretty much obsolete. And it's very frustrating over time. And especially if it's looking at it as a family-based business. And since we started homeschooling, I was more interested in what are things that we can do together as a family. So when I started researching this book, I wanted to find out not just what will be around, what's durable, and what will, survive any potential upheaval or recession or pandemic or, these kinds of things, but what was the most family-centered of these trades? I wanted to know, like, what are the best options out there? And so I came up with a way to rank all of these trades. And I use these different scoring metrics like historical stability, family-centeredness, barriers to entry. And I came up with a whole criteria list and scored each of the trades according to these metrics. And then in the book, I rank them 1 to 61. So you're starting out at the very beginning of the book with the most family-centered and the most durable trades. And by the time you get to tax collector at the very end, it's the least family-centered and the least durable, but hey, it has actually survived a long time.
Is politician mentioned? I'm trying to remember.
Statesman's in there, yeah. It's a terribly durable trade, unfortunately, for the rest of us.
So you mentioned also about, and I appreciate that you did that and put that in the book. You mentioned also about apprenticeship. My wife and I, our oldest is 20 years old, and we're kind of new at this life launch thing. So just trying to figure this out about how do we prepare our children for their futures. I'm an author and conference speaker. I've had no expectation that there's going to be an Israel Wayne Jr. that's going to go do what I do. At this point, I don't think that God's called any of my children to do that same thing. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to use my business to help my children learn work ethic, which is important anywhere they go, but then whatever skills can be learned within the capacity of, helping at conventions and setting up book tables and taking orders and running the cash register and filling orders at home and, doing different things, proofreading things, whatever, that they have some skills and just even know kind of how a business works and all of that, to help them with whatever it is that they go do, because I don't necessarily anticipate that they're going to work for my business as adults or whatever. But just quickly, my 20-year-old, when he was 17, was approached by an elder in our church who is an eye surgeon. And he was asked if Ben would want to come on as a part-time employee at that time, to help be an assistant for him in his eye surgeries. This man also was my son's Bible quizzing coach, and he's a man that I know and that I respect, and he's a very godly man. And I had been praying for this aspect of mentorship, that God would send godly men into my children's lives, and godly women, to be able to take them farther than what my wife and I have been able to. Because I think it's kind of arrogant for us as parents to think that we can be, in the end, everything that our children need, especially as they get into their older teen years. And so I've been praying about that. And so when this man approached me, I instantly resonated with this as being an answer to my prayer, not only from a relational mentorship side, but occupationally as well. And he told me that they have certain credentialing that you can get through their business. So my son actually just finished being credentialed as a scrub tech through them. And he got all of the training paid by the company.
Wow.
And got his credentialing through the company. So as of yet, he could still go to community college or something and get some credits if he wanted to, but he can actually work at the hospital now.
Wow.
Because he's gotten that through the mentorship. And one of the other eye surgeons there is a former worship leader at our former church, who Ben's known since he was 10. So, he gets to work with this other guy who he's known, from this other church. And, the current worship leader at our current church works there, so I mean, there's just like, there's a lot of relationships that he has there. Not everyone who works at this place is a Christian, which is good too, in the sense that, it's the real world, right? And so it's not like he's living in a little Christian bubble, but it's also not like he just got thrown out in the deep end of the pool. So I was super thankful because I was praying about it, but I didn't know where to go. Right. And so your book wasn't out yet. I didn't have that resource yet. But I felt like God just sort of walked us into that and blessed us with that. But what are some other opportunities? Like, how do people, if they say, I like that idea of apprenticeship, two questions. Number one, how do they get plugged into apprenticeship, or how does that even work? And then secondly, Jesus said, when a student's fully trained, he'll be like his teacher. And so how do you make sure that this is somebody you want them to be apprenticed by?
Absolutely.
And so what are your thoughts on the apprenticeship side?
Well, that's exactly why you need to be cautious about education decisions, because there's a lot of people who become like their college professors, and parents may not recognize that that's always what's going to happen. But a lot of times they can really take on the values and the culture of wherever they're receiving their instruction, especially in that age where they're becoming into adulthood. And so I would really encourage parents to be on the lookout, as you were doing, of what their kids' gifts are. I'll have Becca share in a second about how we use the book to try to adapt to our family, but be on the lookout for what God has gifted your children to do. And then look for people, mentors, elders in your church maybe, or other people that you trust as parents, that might be a good fit for them to learn a specific skill over their working years. I mean, I'm talking about starting at age, 10, 12, 13, whenever your kid has the aptitude to it. Of course, you cannot employ someone legally under the age of 14 in this country unless it's in your own family business. But there are many ways that they can get plugged in and begin to learn, not just, and don't think of it just as they're learning a skill that they're going to use and it's going to help provide an income. And that's part of it. But there's a much more important part, which is they're going to learn a culture. They're going to learn ethics. They're going to learn integrity. They're going to learn how do Christians function in the workplace, and how do Christians, I make the point is that when you're at work, it's really the best context for discipleship. The real person is on display. So who you are as Israel the dad, or who I am as Rory the dad, it's one thing when I'm telling the kids what to do over supper, or pick up your room and do your chores and these kinds of things, or on Sunday morning. But if they come to work with me, if they're with me while I'm trying to put up goat fencing and the goats are getting out and I can't I'm getting stressed out and harried and I'm running out of time, that's the real me. They get to see who I actually am. And in the case of my own Christian journey and my own sanctification, they get to see where dad's really at. How does he actually respond? And that's why I think work is such a powerful place to disciple your children. And that's one of my main concerns of what was lost when we separated the children out of the family, brought them into educational institutions, and put dad away in a cubicle or in a factory for 60 hours a week. That whole side of the discipleship equation was lost. So I kind of went off a little bit on a tangent there, but that would be the thing that I would recommend to parents, is to be watching for their giftings, and then be watching, and like you were praying for God to send people who can be that representative for their children.
As a homeschool mom, I think my job got so exciting when I realized that's my gig. That's what I get to do. I get to just keep an eye on each kid and just what is their interest and what are their gifts. And just like you said, then you're praying for mentors. But then my eyes were just opened. Oh, he's really interested in woodworking. And then who do we know? Little field trips we could do, ways to expose him to those things. I think about, I had a field trip. We went to the Gedney pickle factory, kids were passing out. That terrible field trip. It's terrible. But to go to a man in our congregation who has a workshop and this is his livelihood. Now that's exciting. That's fun. And you can do that when the kids are 6 and 8 and, they don't have to be, you don't have to be just launching them. But to me, that's where this has potential to be a lot of fun as well, kind of seeing who God created these kids to be, and then how do we best set them up?
Absolutely. All right. Well, as we close here, any final words that you would have just of advice for people? Obviously, we want you to get the book, and you can find Durable Trades would be, where is the best place for people to plug into this?
It's in bookstores everywhere. So you can find it on all the traditional bookstores. You can come to our site, thegrovestead.com. And what we do is, if there's any discounts that we know of, we'll publish them on the site there, so you can save a few bucks. And then we also publish a newsletter on that website too. We'd encourage, if people want to follow along with some of the ways that we're trying to build a family economy here, we would encourage that. And then the only other thing that we haven't really touched on is that the way the book is laid out, it's a great reference for families if they just want to thumb through it and kind of get an idea of what it might be like to work in a certain durable trade or a family-centered profession. There's a lot of interviews with people who are 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation. I think there's a 5th generation farmer that's in there. And so there's a lot of interesting day in the life of interviews that can kind of help flesh out what some of these are in terms of either if you're a parent with kids who are getting older and considering college or future careers, it could be a great reference for them. Or if you're like I was in kind of mid-career and trying to look around and say, hey, is there anything else out there? Because I don't want to do this for another 20 years. That's kind of how the book is laid out for people, just to see what the options are and what it looks like.
Well, we will make sure that we link to your website in the show notes so that people can click over and get plugged in with what you're doing and tap into your newsletter and stay in touch with your family and see how your family is growing and adapting and changing along with the rest of us. As we're all trying to find our way. And my son, who's 17, Isaac, this week he's tapping maple syrup here in Michigan. So one of the great things that we enjoy. He's our homesteader. He's the one who puts in a garden when we're home enough to do one, and he's got a real bent in that way. And so what's great for me with this book now as a dad is that this is a great resource for me with my teenagers, as they're saying, well, I don't know what I want to do, and when you have a 17-year-old, everyone in the world is grinding down on them What are you going to do with your life? What kind of career are you going to have? Are you going to go to college? What are you going to, they don't know. Right. And some do, but most have no idea. And so they just start making up stuff,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a computer game programmer.
Right.
Yeah.
And let me mention, by the way, the book is organized such a way that it's not just about income. In fact, income only makes up 1/5 of the score. It's really what is going to bring fulfillment to your life. That is to me the much more important picture. And so, but I will say, because I went to work with carpenters, I went to work at a butcher shop for a couple months while I was working through this, just to learn more about some of these trades. Many tradesmen earn a lot more than I ever did as a computer programmer. The rates for tradesmen and some of the manual trades and the building trades are sky high.
They are.
And so it's some of it is a misnomer to think that just because you decide to go an apprenticing route or a manual route, that you can't earn as high of an income as if you go get that computer programming job. It's not necessarily the case.
Very true. Yeah, I'm actually paying for some house remodeling stuff right now. And I'm painfully aware of that. Guy told me the other day, he said the going rate in our area for contractors is $100 an hour.
Yeah.
And so there really are, and everyone who's doing HVAC or, stuff that's just manual work where you get paid, plumbers, they said we have no young people who want to work for us.
Exactly. The average age is somewhere, depending on who you talk to in the industry, is like 50 to 60 years old. Right. There's going to be a massive turnover, and there's no one coming up to fill those jobs. So it's basically going to be name your price for a long time to come.
Yeah, there's a guy in my area that I hired as a chimney sweep. And he said, I've been looking for someone to turn this business over to because I'm getting elderly. And he said, I can't find anyone who wants to do the work. And he retired, and there's no one in our area that does it now.
Wow.
There are just so many things like that, everyone wants a tech job or a medical job. And I get that. And there's need for those things. But you're right that there are some of these trades, because if your septic tank needs cleaned out, and people may frown at that. Those people make a lot of money.
They do make a lot of money.
And it's a needful thing. And it's always going to be like what you said about durable trades. These service industries are always going to be relevant. So I do feel like as homeschoolers and as Christians, not everyone who listens to our podcast homeschools, but as homeschoolers, we've already started to think outside the box on the educational paradigm. And it really is a lifestyle of family togetherness. And that's really what we're looking for. We want to glorify God, and we want to learn how to do that together as a family. And so your book is an excellent resource for helping parents to be able to learn how to move that over into the economic sphere and into the business sphere. So I encourage people to click on the link below in the show notes and go to your website one more time. Was your blog site?
thegrovestead.com.
thegrovestead.com. Appreciate you guys, and Lord willing, we will have you back on in the future, and we will talk with you again.
And bring Isaac out to the farm next time you pass through.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. God bless you guys.
You too.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay. I think that worked.
There were no issues from our end.